made a covenant with Noah, promising him and all of his posterity that he would never again destroy the earth and all life on it with a flood. And God blessed Noah and his sons and commanded them to once again multiply and spread out upon the earth. But on the plains of Shinar, men disobeyed God's command, and instead they came together to build a city and a great tower they intended to reach to the heavens in an ultimate act of rebellion and rejection of God. But God came down and put a stop to their tower by dividing their once unified language into many languages. And out of confusion and fear, they stopped building the tower and dispersed into what would become the nations of the world. It was within a few centuries after Noah and his family departed from the ark that the people of the world were of one language. But today, there are over 7,000 languages in the world, which trace back to an ancestral family group that each belongs to. For example, Italian can be traced back to Latin, its root language family. However, when linguists attempted to trace the root language families further upstream, they encountered a serious problem. The language families would eventually lead to dead ends, otherwise known as language isolates. This directly contradicts the merged root language that evolutionists were expecting to find, or what some linguists theoretically call the elusive proto-world language. Instead, what they find are a bunch of languages that seemed to have emerged out of nowhere. Unless, of course, you factor in the events that took place at the Tower of Babel, which provides an incredible explanation evolutionists refuse to accept. Further still, consider that when you trace known languages on a map, something very telling occurs. Many of the earliest languages trace back to one location on Earth, a place commonly referred to as the cradle of civilization, Mesopotamia. And what's also revealing is that the time frame of many languages also trace back to that approximate point in time, which is just after the flood and Tower of Babel in the 3rd millennium BC. Furthermore, linguists believe that approximately 94 proto-language families should exist in theory, and they also believe that this number may lower over time as more research leads to more mergers. By no coincidence, there are approximately 70 people groups in the biblical table of nations, recorded in the Bible around the time of the Babel event. What are the odds that the estimated root language families so closely reflect the same number of the nations the Bible lists at the time of the Tower of Babel? And what's more is that these people groups also have myths and legends within their cultures of both an ancient flood that destroyed the world and a time when their ancestors attempted to build a tower. These stories, of course, vary, but the core elements tend to remain intact, with the Cherokee and other Native American tribes even including that their language was once changed much earlier in history, as only one example of hundreds. In like fashion, human genetics also reveal a similar pattern to the languages, as the genes extracted from over 100 human remains from the so-called Bronze Age era revealed that the further back in time you go, the less genetic mixing there was, with their data showing relatively unmixed genetic lineages around the time of Babel, which of course is no coincidence. Only God's supernatural intervention can explain the multifaceted bottleneck we see across so many fields of science. It was at this event that God changed the entire course of human history once again. It was also after Babel that God instituted human government, and at a time when nationalism is being attacked by those wishing to establish a one world government, it is important to remember that it was God who divided the world into nations. It was God who was against the man centered, godless society mankind was beginning to fashion. And as any historian will tell you, history has a way of repeating itself.